Hello, my name is Jerry Bolinger, and I'm a member here at Eel River Community Church of the Brethren. And in an effort to get to know each other a little bit better here within our church, everybody's kind of doing an interview, and people had sent in questions that they wanted me to answer, and so I'm going to be answering some of those questions that people had submitted. I can't think of necessarily just one person that had influenced me. I mean, as you go through life, you sort of pick up things from a lot of different people. My parents were important, an important influence. When I was in junior high, we had a pastor at West Manchester, Peter Michael. He was a young pastor. That's when I was baptized, and that was an influence, I believe. Teachers, Luke Hunt, who was a biology teacher at Whitco that taught with my mother. He was a good Christian guy, and we had a lot of similar interests, and that was an important person as I was growing up. A lot of the people in my church are at West Manchester. Frank Beaver, I have a lot of respect for Frank. As I was in high school, when we still had to register for selective service, and I was going through trying to discern where I stood on that, a lot of these people that I would talk to, and Frank, I really appreciated, his experiences, and I still just respect the things that he went through, and other people there in our church that were part of that great generation and went through those things. Some of the Hoovers and those people. Those were important. Cliff and Arlene, I met them probably around 1985. We were on a trip to West Virginia, and that was my first exposure to them, and we developed a relationship, and I've known them ever since. My mom's brother, Lee Brubaker, he was sort of an eccentric kind of guy, but he had a real deep appreciation for nature, and he spent a lot of time preserving and developing a natural area down by Laketon, the Laketon Bog. It's now a state property. But I appreciated that, and I think that kind of helped develop my interest in nature and trying to preserve natural areas and leave things maybe a little bit better if you can than when you started. I suppose mainly was my mother. She was a teacher as long as I can remember. She taught grade school at Manchester, and of course she was really into music, and she was a music teacher, but also a grade level teacher. And I think she inspired me that way a lot. And I just always liked to be able to show people how to do things. And so as I would learn things, it's just nice to kind of pass that on and just to develop the ability for people to do things on their own, but I suppose that was a major influence as far as teaching. My grandfathers, I guess I'm a grandfather now, so it's kind of coming full circle. But I didn't know my dad's dad. Grandpa Bolinger, he died when I was fairly young, but he was a real entrepreneur, kind of go-getter. He started a lot of businesses in town there and things like that. My mom's father, Luther Brubaker, he did a lot of different things, but he ran a salvage yard back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and until he died, and he could fix anything, and a lot of people would always be coming there to have things repaired or looking for odd parts for something, and he just had barns full of, you name it. I mean, he tore apart old steam engines and just all kinds of things, and that was always a neat place to go and look at all that stuff. And as I think back, that was he was doing all this repurposing and recycling, which was just kind of the way they did it out of necessity. And I think we could do a lot better job with that than what we do. But and I just hope, as far as my grandkids, I don't know if it's always true, but it seems like interests skip generations. My dad was really into livestock, and it was okay, but it wasn't my passion. But Andrew kind of picked up on that, and so I don't know. I'm hoping maybe I may have some grandkids that will have some interest in artistic creation, and I just hope I hope to be around to where I can give them a place and tools and guidance on maybe developing some of those interests if they're so inclined. I mean, you can't make somebody be interested, but it's just kind of interesting how that cycle seems to work sometimes. As far as what I get out of that question is what inspires me to create. A lot of my inspiration comes from nature, just from the beauty and the wonder and the magnificence of creation that is just so amazing. And also an interest in history and seeing how people did things and the things they created, when they did things a lot different than we do now. And in terms of a muse is also a structure to keep birds of prey in when you're falconers. And so that was, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there too. When I was at Purdue, there's some other guys in the house where I lived, and we were into falconry, and so we raised birds, and that was, you had to have a state-approved muse to keep them in and stuff. But anyway. I don't know, I just like making things, and so you make a lot of different things. You make a lot of mistakes, and that's how you learn. And I just like learning new materials and new techniques and stuff. But some of the log houses I've done, different places, have turned out really interesting. And we've done, 30 some of those, I guess, over the years. But some of my favorite work, I think, is pieces that are historically oriented, where I might find a couple pieces in a museum or something and try to recreate that, using the materials and just learning the techniques that they would use. And and I guess the log houses are sort of a historical thing too, in some respects. But there's just a lot of things. I forget a lot of the things I've made over the years, and they'll show up every once in a while. But okay, well, I think I'll change my hat for this one. This is my second Pennsylvania hat, but and I guess I prefer the term living history as opposed to reenactments, because reenactments are just one part or one facet of that whole hobby, or whatever you would call it. I was always kind of interested in history, but when in 72 or 3, my sister was at Purdue, and she was in the horticulture club there. And one of their fundraising activities, they made cider. They pressed cider and took it out to the Feast of the Hunter's Moon, which was a festival that reenacted the French coming down there with their canoes, trading with the Native Americans at Fort Ouiatenon, just outside of Lafayette. And so I just thought that was really neat. I saw people that were making things and selling things. And so when I was 16, which was in 1976, I was accepted. You had to apply and be approved or whatever. And so I was accepted to participate in that. And so since then, I've been there every year since 76, except for last year when they canceled it. And I've learned a lot through those years. First year I went down there, I was 16, and I had a buckskin jacket and a paint tarp little tent. When my sister married Kevin, he was really involved with with history and with reenactments, and he was involved with a lot more organized groups out east. And through that, I had opportunities to participate in a lot of events that they would do. But anyway, so through them, we had opportunities to do documentaries and movies. We did a series of movies for the Park Service, like at Yorktown and different places. We would do reenactments and things for them. Some of those I think they still show in their visitor centers. But we were invited by Great Britain to represent the United States for a tour basically commemorating the Treaty of Paris, which was in 1783. And so we did a tour in England performing military tacticals and things at different sites. We performed at Blenheim Palace and different places, and so that was a neat experience. We've been involved in Hollywood movies. Last one we did was Last of the Mohicans, and that's just neat to see how that whole process works. When they set up all the train tracks and for the cameras and all the pyrotechnics and stuff, and then painting dirt on your it was interesting doing those kind of things. So I grew up at West Manchester Church of the Brethren. That was kind of my ancestral church. My dad, my grandfather, they grew up there. That's an old Dunkard church, and my granddad, back in the 50s, late 40s or early 50s, did a lot of the converting that, where you used to have two doors where the men came in one and women came in the other, and they put a common entrance and put podiums up front and things, which was different than the traditional church. So I grew up there. I never really thought figured I'd stay there till I died, but I was kind of the tail end of the youth in that church. There was kind of a baby boomer group, a lot of Hoovers, but there was about a 4-year gap before the last of them and me. I was just kind of there, and so I didn't have a real big youth group there. But that's where I went. I mean, Mary and I were married there in '92, and when we had our own kids, it's kind of concerning because we really wanted them to be with other kids, and there were a couple that would come occasionally, but it wasn't really the kind of group we were wanting, and our numbers there just were steadily declining, because people leave and kids would grow up and they wouldn't come back, like is fairly typical, and the congregation ages and you lose members. And so I don't know, it was around probably 2000 or so, we started going there for church still because I was involved with that church, and then we started coming up here for Sunday school, so the boys would have a youth group to work with. And then, our numbers continued to decline, and it got to the point where, budget-wise and stuff, it takes a certain amount to stay open, and so we had to have a lot of difficult conversations and try to decide what we were going to do. I didn't really want to just close, because then our assets would go, to the national office. Not that I have anything against them, but I was wanting us to keep what we had here so we could help this area grow. And so, it's September of 2007 was when we had our last service there. And after that, we merged in with Eel River. And so we've been coming here ever since. And but that's kind of typical of the position a lot of churches are in. It's interesting. We were lucky that we were able to find a place to go with our building and stuff there. The Old World German Baptist New Conference, whatever it is, they've moved in there. They're a pretty vibrant group, and it's just interesting. They a lot of those changes my granddad did back in the 40s. They put back like it used to be a little bit. They didn't put two doors, you know, still just have one door, but the podiums came down so it was all on the same level, more like the German Baptists do, and hat racks in the back and different things. And it's just kind of neat how that stayed in at least that Anabaptist tradition and kind of went full circle again too with some of that. But that's how we ended up here, and I've appreciated a lot of people here, and the story continues, I guess. I mean, I've really, like I said, I've appreciated a lot of the people here, and you know, when the boys were growing up, you know, that's when Souders were here with the kids and the other kids they had to work with, and I just think that's a real important thing. And because when kids are growing up, you can, you know, as a parent, you can try, but they don't always listen to their parents that well, and they need to hear those things from other people. A lot of times it means so much more coming from somebody else, especially a younger person, or you know, somebody that they look up to a little bit. I mean, you hope they look up to you too, but you just need to hear it from somebody else, and so it's important. And I appreciated having that place for the boys, and I think that was really important for them.